A week after my husband's funeral, the captain of his unit called me. "Ma'am, I found something. Come to the station. Don't tell your son. You need to see this first." And what he showed me changed everything. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. The phone rang at exactly 3:15 in the afternoon, cutting through the suffocating silence that had become my constant companion since Trent's funeral. I was sitting in his favorite armchair, the one by the window where he used to read his morning paper, when Captain Miller's voice broke through my grief like a knife. "Mrs. Henderson? This is Captain Miller from the 23rd Precinct. I need you to come down to the station. There's something your husband left here that you need to see." My hands trembled as I gripped the receiver. "What kind of something? I can't discuss it over the phone, ma'am, but it's important, very important. And Mrs. Henderson?" His voice dropped lower. "Don't tell your son about this call. Not yet." The line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone like it might offer some explanation. "Don't tell Marcus." Those words sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the October air seeping through our old windows. I'd been expecting this call for a week now, though I couldn't have said why. Ever since we lowered Trent's casket into the ground, something had felt wrong. Not just the obvious wrongness of losing your husband of 43 years to a sudden heart attack, but something deeper. Something that made my skin crawl every time Marcus and Jennifer exchanged those meaningful glances they thought I couldn't see. "Mom, you really shouldn't be driving anymore." That's what Marcus had said just yesterday, his voice dripping with the kind of false concern that made my teeth ache. Jennifer had nodded along, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against our kitchen table like she was already calculating square footage. "The house is too big for you now," Jennifer had added, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. "We've been looking at some lovely assisted living facilities. Golden Years has an opening, and they take Medicare." Golden Years. I'd driven past that place. Gray concrete walls, tiny windows, and the smell of disinfectant that couldn't quite mask the odor of people waiting to die. The thought made my stomach turn. But now, sitting with Captain Miller's words echoing in my head, I felt something I hadn't felt since Trent died. Purpose. Whatever he'd left at the station, whatever secret he'd been keeping, I was going to find it. I grabbed my purse and car keys, my arthritic fingers fumbling with the locks. The drive to the station took 23 minutes. 23 minutes of my mind racing through possibilities, each one more disturbing than the last. Captain Miller met me at the front desk, his weathered face grave. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 50, with kind eyes that reminded me of my late brother. "Mrs. Henderson, thank you for coming. I know this must be difficult." He led me through a maze of desks and ringing phones to a small office in the back. The nameplate on the door read, "Captain J. Miller," in faded gold letters. "Your husband came to see me 3 weeks before he died," Captain Miller said, settling behind his desk. "He was worried about something. Something, he said, involved your family." My mouth went dry. What kind of worry? Captain Miller opened his desk drawer and pulled out a manila envelope, thick and sealed with tape. Trent's handwriting across the front read, "For Dora, if something happens to me." He said if anything happened to him, I should give this to you personally. He was very specific about that. No one else was to see it first. I stared at the envelope, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Did he say what was in it? No, ma'am, but he did say something else. Captain Miller leaned forward, his expression serious. "He said to tell you that Marcus was in trouble, big trouble, and that people might come looking for money." The words hit me like ice water. Marcus in trouble. It explained so much. The late-night phone calls that stopped abruptly when I walked into the room, the way he'd been pushing me to sign financial papers, claiming it was just easier if he handled everything. Jennifer's sudden interest in our family finances, asking about insurance policies and bank accounts with the enthusiasm of someone planning a shopping spree. "What kind of people?" I whispered. "The kind you don't want showing up at your front door, Mrs. Henderson. The kind who don't take no for an answer when it comes to collecting debts." I took the envelope with shaking hands. It felt heavy, weighted with secrets I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "There's something else," Captain Miller said, his voice gentler now. "Your husband paid for extra patrols around your neighborhood for the next 2 months. He said he wanted to make sure you stayed safe." Safe from what? From whom? The questions burned in my throat, but I could see from Captain Miller's expression that he'd told me everything he knew. The drive home felt like a journey through fog. My mind kept circling back to the envelope sitting on my passenger seat, to Captain Miller's words about debt collectors, to the way Marcus had been acting since the funeral, pushy, impatient, like he was waiting for something to happen. I pulled into my driveway just as Marcus's silver sedan rounded the corner. Perfect timing, as always. He had a key, of course, but lately he'd been using it without calling first, walking into my house like he already owned it. I shoved the envelope deep into my purse just as he knocked on the door. "Mom, there you are. I was worried when you didn't answer the phone." Marcus stepped inside, Jennifer close behind him. She was carrying a stack of papers, and her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "We brought the Golden Years application," Jennifer announced, settling onto my couch like she belonged there. "The administrator said if we get it in today, you could have the corner room. Much better lighting." I looked at my son, this man who used to curl up in my lap during thunderstorms, who'd cried when his goldfish died, who'd promised at his father's funeral that he'd take care of me. Now he couldn't even meet my eyes. "I'm not ready to move anywhere," I said quietly. "Mom, be reasonable." Marcus's voice had that edge it got when he was frustrated. "This house is falling apart. The stairs are dangerous. What if you fall and no one finds you for days? Your father just died a week ago, which is exactly why we need to think practically," Jennifer interjected. "Grief makes people make poor decisions. We're just looking out for your best interests." Looking out for my best interests. The same words Trent used to mock when telemarketers called, trying to sell us things we didn't need. But Jennifer wasn't selling anything. She was taking. I excused myself to use the bathroom, clutching my purse. In the privacy of the small room, I tore open the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Marcus sitting across from men in expensive suits at various restaurants around town. Marcus shaking hands with the same men outside what looked like a casino. Marcus signing papers while one of the men watched, his expression cold and calculating. At the bottom of the stack was a note in Trent's careful handwriting. "Dora, our son owes these people $87,000. They've threatened all of us. I'm handling it. Trust no one until you're sure you're safe." The safety deposit box key is taped under the kitchen sink. Box number 409 at First National. I love you. T. My legs gave out, and I sank onto the toilet seat, photographs scattered across my lap. $87,000. The number swam in front of my eyes like something from a nightmare. From the living room, I could hear Jennifer's voice getting more insistent, Marcus agreeing with everything she said. They weren't here out of love or concern. They were here because they were scared. And now I knew why. I gathered the photographs and stuffed them back into the envelope, my hands steadier now despite the shock. Whatever game they were playing, whatever danger Marcus had brought to our door, Trent had been one step ahead. The question was, what else had he left for me to find? I waited until Marcus and Jennifer left before retrieving the safety deposit box key from under the kitchen sink. Trent had taped it there so carefully that I almost missed it, hidden behind the garbage disposal's electrical cord. My husband, it seemed, had been planning for this moment long before his heart gave out. The drive to First National Bank the next morning felt like entering enemy territory. Every car in my rearview mirror could be following me. Every stranger on the sidewalk could be watching. Captain Miller's warning about debt collectors had planted seeds of paranoia that were blooming in full color. Mrs. Chen, the bank manager, had known Trent for 20 years. She led me down to the vault personally, her expression somber as she slid the key into box 409. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Mrs. Henderson. Your husband was a good man. He came in about a month ago to update this box." A month ago, right around the time Marcus had started pushing me to sign those financial papers. right around the time Jennifer had begun asking about our insurance policies with the intensity of an investigative reporter. Inside the box were documents that made my blood run cold. Bank statements showing Marcus had borrowed against our house without telling us. Credit reports revealing he'd opened accounts in my name. Most damning of all, a series of threatening letters addressed to our family. The first one was dated 6 months ago, written in block letters on plain white paper. Your son owes us money. $87,412. Interest accumulates daily. Pay or face consequences. The second letter, dated 3 months later, was more specific. Final notice. Your family's safety depends on Marcus fulfilling his obligations. We know where you live. We know your routines. Payment arrangements must be made immediately. The third letter made my hands shake. Mrs. Henderson, your husband's death changes nothing. The debt remains. Your son will contact us within 48 hours, or we will contact you personally. That letter was dated 2 days after Trent's funeral. Beneath the letters were copies of Marcus's gambling records from 3 different casinos. Pages and pages of losses, each one bigger than the last. Poker games where he'd lost $5,000 in a single night. Slot machines that had eaten up our vacation fund. Sports betting that had cost him more than I'd earned in 2 years of working part-time at the library. But the worst discovery was at the bottom of the box. A life insurance policy I'd never heard of, taken out on me 3 months ago. The beneficiary was Marcus. The payout was $200,000. I sat in that cold vault, surrounded by evidence of my son's betrayal, and felt something inside me break. Not my heart that had broken when Trent died. This was something deeper. My faith in the family I'd spent 43 years building. Mrs. Henderson? Chen's voice seemed to come from very far away. Are you all right? I wasn't all right. I wasn't sure I'd ever be all right again. But I was awake now, fully awake for the first time since Trent's death. I need to make a withdrawal, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Everything from our joint savings account. Mrs. Chen looked uncomfortable. That's quite a substantial amount. Perhaps you should discuss it with your son first. He did ask us to notify him of any large transactions. Of course he had. Marcus was covering all his bases, making sure he'd know the moment I tried to access my own money. This is my account, I said firmly. And I want every penny of it. Today. An hour later, I walked out of First National with $38,600 in cashier's checks hidden in my purse. It was everything Trent and I had saved for our retirement, money we'd planned to use for the European trip we'd been dreaming about since our honeymoon. Now it felt like the only thing standing between me and whatever Marcus had brought down on our family. The house felt different when I returned home, like someone had been there while I was gone. Nothing was obviously disturbed. But 43 years of marriage teaches you to notice when something is off. The kitchen chair was pushed out differently. The mail had been shifted on the counter. Someone had been looking through my things. I was hiding the bank documents in my bedroom closet when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a man in an expensive suit holding a briefcase. He looked exactly like the men in the photographs Trent had left me. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pretended not to be home. The man stood on my porch for 5 long minutes, occasionally cupping his hands to peer through windows. Finally, he left a business card wedged in my doorframe and walked away. The card was simple, white with black lettering. Vincent Torino, Financial Consulting. We specialize in resolving family obligations. Family obligations. As if Marcus's gambling debts were something we'd all agreed to take on together. I was still staring at the card when my phone rang. Marcus's name appeared on the caller ID, and for the first time since his father's death, I let it go to voicemail. His message was tense, barely controlled. Mom, I need to talk to you. It's important. Some people might be trying to contact you, and you shouldn't talk to them without me there. I'm coming over tonight after work. Too late for that, son. The people you're so worried about had already found me. The afternoon dragged by like a prison sentence. I kept checking the locks, peeking through curtains, jumping at every sound. This was what fear felt like when it had a specific address, when it knew your name and your daily routine. Around 4 o'clock, I called Captain Miller. "They came to my house," I told him without preamble. "One of the men from the photographs." "Are you safe now?" "I think so. But Captain Miller, there's more. So much more than we thought." I told him about the safety deposit box, about Marcus's gambling debts, about the life insurance policy. Captain Miller listened without interrupting, but I could hear him taking notes. "Mrs. Henderson, I need you to listen to me very carefully. These people don't play games. If they've escalated to visiting your home, that means they're done waiting." "What do I do?" "First, you don't let Marcus into your house tonight. Whatever story he's prepared, whatever promises he wants to make, he's already proven you can't trust him." The words hit harder than they should have. Marcus was my son, my only child, the baby I'd rocked through colic and fever and nightmares. But Captain Miller was right. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal just because you want it to. "Second," Captain Miller continued, "you need to consider that your husband might have had a backup plan. He was thorough enough to document everything else. There might be more. A backup plan." I thought about Trent's methodical nature, the way he'd always planned for contingencies. Where would he have hidden something else? What would he have wanted me to find? The answer hit me as I was hanging up the phone. The garage, Trent's workshop, where he'd spend hours building birdhouses and fixing broken furniture. The one place in our house that Marcus and Jennifer never bothered to explore, because it was too cluttered and too covered in sawdust for Jennifer's designer tastes. I found it wedged behind Trent's tool cabinet. Another envelope, this one sealed with wax. Inside was a single piece of paper with an address I didn't recognize and a set of keys. At the bottom, in Trent's handwriting, "If they come for you, go here. You'll understand everything." As Marcus's car pulled into the driveway at exactly 6:30, I realized that everything I'd thought I knew about my life was about to change. The question was whether I was brave enough to let it. But first, I had to face my son and pretend I didn't know what he'd done to us all. Marcus stood on my doorstep looking like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his tie loosened, and there were dark circles under his eyes that makeup couldn't hide. For a moment, he looked like the scared little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. "Mom, we need to talk." His voice cracked on the last word. I let him in, because despite everything, despite the photographs and the bank statements and the life insurance policy I'd never agreed to, he was still my son, the child I'd nursed through pneumonia when he was 7, who'd called me crying from college when his first girlfriend broke his heart. Jennifer wasn't with him, which surprised me. They'd been joined at the hip since the funeral, making decisions about my life like I was already dead. "Where's Jennifer?" I asked, settling into Trent's chair while Marcus paced the living room like a caged animal. "She doesn't know I'm here." Marcus stopped pacing and faced me, his expression desperate. "Mom, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you and Dad months ago." Here it comes, I thought. The confession, the apology, the explanation for why my son had tried to steal my life out from under me. "I'm in trouble," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Bad trouble." I waited, letting the silence stretch between us. Let him fill it with his guilt. "I owe money, a lot of money, to people who don't understand words like payment plan or extension." "How much money?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Marcus's shoulders sagged. $87,412. The precise amount from the threatening letters. At least he wasn't lying about that. "Gambling?" I kept my voice neutral, non-judgmental, the way I'd learned to speak to him when he was a teenager coming home past curfew. He nodded, unable to meet my eyes. "It started small, just a few hands of poker with guys from work. Then I discovered online sports betting. It was supposed to be fun, you know? A way to make watching games more exciting. The classic story. It always started with fun. But I was good at it, Mom. For a while, I was really good. I won $12,000 in one weekend on a college basketball tournament. And then you lost it." "And then I lost it." Marcus sank into the couch, his head in his hands, all of it, plus more, much more. I studied my son, this 45-year-old man who still expected me to fix his problems. What did your father know? Marcus looked up sharply. What do you mean? Your father knew, didn't he? That's why he was acting strange these past few months. That's why he kept asking about our finances, making sure all our accounts were secure. He confronted me about 6 weeks before he died. Marcus's voice was hollow. Said he'd seen some charges on my credit report that didn't make sense. Casino cash advances, online gambling sites. I tried to lie, but you know how Dad was. He could see right through me. Yes, I did know how Trent was. He'd been able to see through Marcus's lies since the boy was 5 years old and blamed the broken lamp on the cat we didn't have. He was furious, Marcus continued, more angry than I'd ever seen him. Not because of the money, but because I'd put you in danger. In danger how? Marcus was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. These people, Mom, the ones I owe money to, they don't just come after the person who owes them. They come after families. They make it clear that everyone you love is at risk until the debt is paid. My blood turned to ice water. They threatened me. They threatened all of us. You, Dad, even Jennifer. They said accidents happen to old people all the time. Falls downstairs, gas leaks, heart attacks, heart attacks. The words echoed in my mind like a death knell. Marcus, I said slowly, your father didn't have a heart condition. I know. The autopsy said it was sudden cardiac arrest. No warning signs, no blocked arteries. I know, Mom. The implication hung between us like a loaded gun. Had these people made good on their threat? Had they killed my husband to send a message to my son? Oh, God, I whispered. Oh, Marcus, what did you do? I didn't know they would hurt him. Marcus exploded off the couch, his composure finally cracking. I thought they were just trying to scare me. People say things like that all the time, but they don't actually what? Murder people? My voice was rising now, 43 years of suppressed anger finally finding a target. You brought killers to our door, Marcus. You got your father murdered over gambling debts. You don't know that's what happened. Don't I? I stood up, facing him across the room. Your father was healthy as a horse. 68 years old and still chopping firewood every weekend. Men like that don't just drop dead of heart attacks. Marcus started crying then, deep, ugly sobs that shook his whole body. It should have broken my heart. A week ago it would have. But now all I felt was a cold, calculating fury. They came to see me today, I told him. One of your creditors. Left his business card like he was selling insurance. Marcus went pale. What did you tell him? Nothing. I hid in the house like a coward while he looked through my windows. Good. That's good. Don't talk to them without me there. I laughed. A bitter sound that surprised us both. Without you there, Marcus, you're the reason they're here. You're the reason your father is dead. Why would I want you anywhere near me when they come back? Because I have a plan. Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, suddenly looking more like the businessman he was supposed to be. Jennifer and I figured it out. If we can get you moved into assisted living, we can sell the house and use the money to pay off the debt. The insurance money from Dad's policy will cover the rest. Insurance money. The $200,000 policy he'd taken out on my life. Did he think I was stupid? Did he think I'd never find out? And what happens to me in this plan? You'll be safe. Somewhere they can't find you. Golden Years has excellent security. Excellent security and no way for me to leave. No way for me to access my own money or make my own decisions. It was a prison sentence disguised as elder care. I'm not signing anything, I said flatly. Marcus's mask slipped again, revealing something desperate and ugly underneath. Mom, you have to. These people won't wait forever. If they think we're not cooperating, then maybe you should have thought about that before you gambled away $87,000 of other people's money. The front door opened without warning, making us both jump. Jennifer walked in like she owned the place, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Marcus, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you. Her gaze shifted to me, and I saw something in her eyes that made my skin crawl. Something calculating and cold. Mrs. Henderson, I hope my husband isn't bothering you with his worries. You know how men can be when they're stressed. She spoke to me like I was a child. Like I was too old and too foolish to understand adult problems. Actually, we were just discussing the assisted living arrangements, Marcus said, his voice stronger now that Jennifer was there to back him up. I was explaining to Mom why it's so important that we move quickly. Of course it is. Jennifer settled onto my couch like she was holding court. At your age, Mrs. Henderson, every day you delay is another day something terrible could happen. What if you fell and broke a hip? What if you had a stroke? Living alone at 68 is just too dangerous. Living alone at 68. But I wasn't living alone. I was living with the memory of my murdered husband, and the knowledge that my son had brought killers to my door. That was far more dangerous than any broken hip. I need some time to think about it, I said. There's nothing to think about, Jennifer replied, her voice sharp now. Marcus showed you the brochures. Golden Years is lovely. Much better than staying in this old house with all its sad memories. Sad memories. Like the 43 years Trent and I had built here. Like the Christmas mornings and birthday parties and quiet Sunday afternoons that had made this house our home. The thing is, Jennifer continued, reaching into her purse, we've already put a deposit down. The administrator is holding your room, but only until tomorrow. If we don't have the signed paperwork by then, you'll go to the bottom of the waiting list. She pulled out the same stack of papers they'd brought yesterday, but now I could see them differently. Not as helpful arrangements made for my benefit, but as a trap closing around me. I said I need time to think. Mom, Marcus's voice had an edge now. You're not thinking clearly. Grief affects people differently. Sometimes it makes them paranoid. Makes them think their own family is out to hurt them. Paranoid. That's what they were calling it when I refused to hand over control of my life. Maybe I should call Dr. Peterson, Jennifer suggested. Have him prescribe something to help with the anxiety. Something to help you see the situation more clearly. Something to make me compliant. Something to make me easier to manage. I looked at my son and daughter-in-law, these two people who were supposed to love me, and finally understood what Trent had seen 6 weeks before he died. They weren't trying to protect me. They were trying to eliminate me as a complication in their solution to Marcus's gambling problem. The house, the insurance money, my compliance in my own imprisonment. It was all part of a plan to clean up the mess Marcus had made of his life, with me as the primary casualty. I think you should both leave now, I said quietly. Mom, get out of my house. Jennifer's facade finally slipped, revealing the cold calculation underneath. You're making a mistake, Mrs. Henderson. A very serious mistake. As they gathered their papers and headed for the door, Jennifer turned back one last time. Those people Marcus owes money to? They're not patient people, and they're not stupid. They know exactly how much this house is worth, exactly how much your insurance policies will pay out. They've done their homework. The threat was clear. Pay up, or accidents would start happening. After they left, I sat in the growing darkness of my living room and finally understood why Trent had left me that address in the garage. It wasn't just a backup plan. It was an escape route. Because the people trying to destroy my life weren't strangers with business cards and expensive suits. They were my own family. The address Trent had left me led to a small cabin on the outskirts of town, hidden behind a grove of oak trees that had probably been standing when this area was still farmland. I'd driven past this property hundreds of times over the years without really noticing it, which I now realized had been entirely the point. The key fit perfectly in the front door lock. Inside, the cabin was sparse but comfortable. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, flanked by built-in bookshelves. A small kitchen occupied the back corner, and I could see a bedroom through an open doorway. Everything was clean, recently used, like someone had been living here. On the kitchen table sat another envelope with my name on it. My hands were steadier now as I opened it, though my heart still raced with each new revelation. Dora. The letter began in Trent's familiar handwriting. If you're reading this, then my plan worked, and you found your way here safely. I know you must be confused and probably angry. Let me explain. I sank into one of the kitchen chairs and continued reading. 3 months ago, Vincent Torino and his associates made it clear that Marcus's debt was now a family problem. They told me accidents happen to elderly people all the time. Heart attacks, strokes, falls downstairs. They were specific about which accidents might befall which family members. My hands began to shake again, but I forced myself to keep reading. I realized they were planning to kill us both, collect the insurance money, and consider Marcus's debt paid. I couldn't let that happen to you, so I made a different plan. A sound from the bedroom made me freeze. Footsteps. Slow, careful footsteps crossing the wooden floor. I should have run. I should have grabbed the car keys and gotten as far away from that cabin as possible. Instead, I sat frozen in my chair as the bedroom door opened wider. Trent walked out. My husband, who I'd buried a week ago, whose funeral I'd sat through in a black dress I'd never wanted to own, walked into that kitchen like he was coming down for his morning coffee. For a moment, neither of us moved. We just stared at each other across the small room. This man I'd loved for 43 years, and this woman who'd spent the last week grieving him. "Hello, sweetheart," he said softly. I must have made some kind of sound, because suddenly he was moving, crossing the room to kneel beside my chair. His hands, warm and familiar, covered mine. "It's really me," he whispered. "I'm so sorry, Dora. I'm so sorry I had to put you through that. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't process the impossible reality of my dead husband's hands holding mine. The funeral," I finally managed. "The casket. I watched them lower you into the ground." "I know." Trent's eyes were wet with tears I hadn't seen since the day his mother died. "I watched too from the back of the cemetery. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do." "But how? The body, the autopsy, the death certificate." "Dr. Martinez owed me a favor. A big favor. Remember when his son got arrested for drunk driving 3 years ago? I was the one who convinced Judge Williams not to send the kid to prison." I remembered. Trent had spent hours on the phone, calling in decades of political favors to help Dr. Martinez's boy. I'd thought it was just Trent being kind, helping a neighbor in trouble. So when I needed help, Dr. Martinez helped me. The body in the casket was John Doe from the county morgue, an elderly man with no family who'd died of natural causes. Dr. Martinez falsified the identification, listed him as me. My mind reeled. The heart attack? Induced with medication. Doctor. Martinez gave me something to slow my heart rate to almost nothing, make me appear dead for several hours. Long enough to be pronounced deceased and transferred to the morgue. "You could have died for real." "Yes." Trent squeezed my hands. "But if I hadn't done it, we both would have died for real, and Marcus would have spent the rest of his life knowing his gambling got his parents killed." I pulled my hands free and stood up, pacing to the window. Outside, the oak trees swayed in the evening breeze, their leaves rustling with secrets of their own. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since the day Torino's men came to our house and made their intentions clear. They gave Marcus 2 weeks to come up with the full amount, or they'd start collecting from family assets." "Family assets? Is that what I am?" "To them, yes." Trent stood up slowly, his movements careful. The fake death had clearly taken a toll on him. Your life insurance policy would cover most of Marcus's debt. The house sale would cover the rest. They had it all figured out. Marcus took out that policy without telling me, under Jennifer's guidance. She's been planning this for months, Dora. Pushing Marcus deeper into debt, encouraging his gambling, making sure he owed more than he could ever repay. I spun around to face him. "What are you talking about? Jennifer isn't just Marcus's wife. She's Vincent Torino's niece." The words hit me like a physical blow. I grabbed the back of a chair to steady myself. "That's impossible." Marcus met her at work. They dated for 2 years before they got married. They dated for 2 years, because that's how long it took to set up the perfect scenario. Marcus was always a mark, Dora. From the very beginning. Trent moved to the bookshelf and pulled out a thick folder. Inside were more photographs, more documents, more evidence of a conspiracy I'd never seen coming. "Jennifer Romano," he said, spreading photos across the kitchen table. "That's her real name. Vincent Torino's brother's daughter. She's been running marriage scams for 15 years, targeting men with gambling problems and elderly parents. The photos showed Jennifer with other men, other families. Always the same pattern. Marry the problem gambler, encourage the addiction, then cash out when the debt became unmanageable. She killed her last husband's mother with a deliberate medication overdose, Trent continued, his voice grim. Made it look like an accident. Collected the insurance and disappeared while the husband went to prison for his debts. I stared at the photos, at this woman I'd welcomed into my home, who'd called me mom and brought casseroles when I was sick. This woman who'd been planning my murder since the day she met my son. Marcus doesn't know, Trent said. He genuinely believes he fell in love with her. She's that good at what she does. Then why haven't you told him? Because it would destroy him, and because I had a better plan. Trent pulled out another folder, this one labeled Vincent Torino, Criminal Associates. Inside were surveillance photos, financial records, and what looked like FBI documents. I've been working with federal investigators for the past 2 months. Torino's organization has been under investigation for loan sharking, money laundering, and murder. They just needed enough evidence to make arrests stick. What kind of evidence? The kind that comes from recording his niece admitting to insurance fraud and planning another murder. I felt the blood drain from my face. You want to use me as bait. I want to give you the choice. You can disappear with me right now. We have new identities waiting, a house in Oregon where no one will ever find us. Or you can help me put them all behind bars and save our son from spending the rest of his life married to a killer. The weight of the decision pressed down on me like a physical force. Run away with my husband, and let Marcus live with a woman who would eventually murder him too. Or stay and fight a battle against people who'd already tried to kill us both. There's something else, Trent said quietly. The federal investigation has uncovered 7 other families like ours. 7 other elderly couples who died in suspicious accidents after their children ran up gambling debts with Torino's organization. 7 families. 7 couples who died because their children had made the same mistakes Marcus had made. How do we do it? I asked. Trent's expression shifted to something I'd rarely seen in 43 years of marriage. Cold, calculating fury. We let them think they've won. We let Jennifer believe her plan is working perfectly, and then we record her confession when she comes to finish what she started. When will that be? Tomorrow night. The Golden Years paperwork has a deadline, remember? If you don't sign by then, they'll have to move to more direct methods. More direct methods. Like the heart attack that had supposedly killed my husband. There's one more thing you need to know, Trent said, his voice gentle again. Once we do this, once we testify against them, our old life is over. Even if we win, even if they all go to prison, we can't go back to being the people we were before. Good, I said, surprised by the strength in my own voice. Those people were victims. I don't want to be a victim anymore. Trent smiled then. The first real smile I'd seen from him since he'd walked out of that bedroom. In that case, Mrs. Henderson, let me show you how we're going to destroy the people who tried to destroy us. As he spread the plans across the kitchen table, I realized that my husband hadn't just faked his death to save our lives. He'd done it to give us the chance to fight back. The next evening arrived with the weight of a funeral shroud. I sat in my living room, wearing the same black dress I'd worn to Trent's burial, waiting for Jennifer to come and collect what she thought would be my signature on my own death warrant. Hidden in my purse was a recording device the FBI had given me, small as a button but powerful enough to capture every word of Jennifer's confession. Trent was positioned in the garage, monitoring everything through equipment that looked like something from a spy movie. The plan was simple in its elegance. Jennifer would come to pressure me into signing the Golden Years paperwork. When I refused, she'd reveal her true intentions, probably threatening me directly. The recording would be enough to arrest her and Vincent Torino's entire organization. What we hadn't planned for was Marcus arriving first. My son knocked on the door at exactly 7 o'clock, his face haggard with stress and sleepless nights. When I let him in, he looked around the living room like he was seeing it for the last time. Mom, we need to talk before Jennifer gets here. I settled into Trent's chair, my hands folded carefully over my purse. What about? Marcus began pacing again, that same restless energy I'd seen the night before. I know you think Jennifer and I are trying to hurt you. I know this whole situation looks bad. It looks bad because it is bad, Marcus. That's just it, though. It's not what you think." He stopped pacing and faced me, his expression desperate. "Jennifer isn't who you think she is." My heart began to race. Had Marcus discovered the truth about his wife? Had Jennifer's mask finally slipped enough for him to see what was underneath? "What do you mean?" "I mean, she's not just my wife. She's—" Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper, like he was afraid someone might be listening. "She's connected to the people I owe money to." I kept my expression carefully neutral. Connected how? She's Vincent Torino's niece. The admission hit the air between us like a gunshot. I stared at my son, this man who'd brought a viper into our family home, who'd married his own destruction without ever realizing it. "You knew?" I whispered. "I found out 3 days ago. I overheard a phone conversation between her and someone she called Uncle Vincent. She was talking about you, about the house, about the insurance money, 3 days ago. While I'd been grieving his father's death, while I'd been discovering the truth about our family's destruction, Marcus had known his wife was planning to murder me. And you didn't think to tell me this immediately?" Marcus's face crumpled. "I was scared, Mom. These people, they don't just kill the person who owes them money. They kill anyone who might cause problems for their operation." "So you decided to let Jennifer kill me instead?" "No!" Marcus exploded. "I decided to find a way to stop her without getting us all killed." He pulled a small device from his pocket, similar to the one hidden in my purse. "I'm recording everything too. When she confesses tonight, I'll have enough evidence to turn her in without implicating myself as an accomplice. My son, the coward who'd gambled away our family's safety, was finally trying to grow a spine. Unfortunately, it was 48 hours too late. Marcus, there's something you need to know about your father's death." "What about it?" Before I could answer, Jennifer's key turned in the front door. She walked in like she owned the place, carrying a briefcase and wearing the kind of predatory smile that sharks must wear just before they attack. "Mrs. Henderson, Marcus, I hope you've both had time to think clearly about our conversation yesterday." She settled onto the couch and opened her briefcase, spreading the golden years paperwork across my coffee table like a dealer arranging cards. "I've spoken with the administrator again," Jennifer continued, her voice sickeningly sweet. "They're willing to extend the deadline until midnight tonight, but only as a personal favor to me. A personal favor. More likely they'd extend the deadline because Jennifer had told them there might be complications with the current resident dying in her sleep." "Jennifer," Marcus said, his voice strained, "maybe we should give Mom more time to adjust to the idea." Jennifer's smile faltered for just a moment. "Adjust to what idea, darling? We're trying to keep her safe." "Safe from what exactly?" I asked, my voice steady despite the terror coursing through my veins. Jennifer's mask slipped another notch. "Safe from living alone at your age, safe from falling downstairs or having accidents in the kitchen. Accidents like the one that killed my husband?" The room went silent. Jennifer's smile disappeared entirely, replaced by something cold and calculating. Marcus looked confused, glancing between his wife and his mother like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "Your husband had a heart attack, Mrs. Henderson. A perfectly natural death for a man his age. Perfectly natural for a man with no history of heart problems and no blocked arteries?" Jennifer's eyes narrowed. "What exactly are you implying?" "I'm implying that you and your uncle killed my husband to send a message to Marcus." Marcus gasped, but Jennifer just laughed. It was a horrible sound, completely devoid of warmth or humor. "You're paranoid, Mrs. Henderson. Grief has made you suspicious of the people who care about you most. People who care about me don't take out life insurance policies without my knowledge. That policy is for your protection. It's for my execution." Jennifer stood up slowly, her movements deliberate and threatening. For the first time since I'd known her, I was seeing the real woman underneath the perfect housewife facade. "Let me explain something to you, Mrs. Henderson. Your son owes my family $87,412. That debt doesn't disappear just because you want to be difficult. Your family? Vincent Torino is my uncle." This whole marriage, this whole charade of loving your pathetic son, has been about collecting that debt. Marcus made a strangled sound, but Jennifer ignored him. We've been very patient, she continued, moving closer to my chair. We allowed your husband to think he was being clever, staging his own death to protect you. Did you really think we didn't know about the cabin? About his little plan with Dr. Martinez? My blood turned to ice. They'd known all along. Trent's elaborate scheme, the fake death, the federal investigation. They'd been aware of everything. Where is he? I whispered. Jennifer smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression I'd ever seen. Let's just say your husband's second death was much more convincing than his first. The words hit me like a physical blow. Trent was dead. Really dead this time. While I'd been sitting in this chair planning our revenge, Jennifer had already won. You're lying. Am I? Jennifer pulled out her phone and showed me a photograph. It was Trent, lying motionless in the cabin where I'd left him that morning. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. Marcus lurched toward the bathroom, and I heard him being violently sick. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process the image of my husband's lifeless body. The federal agents he thought he was working with? Jennifer's voice seemed to come from very far away. They work for us, have for years. Every piece of evidence he thought he was gathering, every plan he thought he was making, we knew about before he did. She knelt beside my chair, her voice dropping to a whisper. But here's the thing, Mrs. Henderson. We still need that signature. The debt still needs to be paid. And now that your husband is really dead, there's no one left to protect you. I looked at this woman, this creature who'd destroyed my family with such casual efficiency, and felt something inside me break apart. Not my heart. That had shattered when I saw Trent's photograph. Something deeper. The part of me that had spent 68 years believing that good people were rewarded and evil people were punished. Sign the papers, Jennifer said, placing a pen in my trembling hand. Sign them, and I'll make sure your death is quick. Refuse, and it will be very, very slow. The pen felt impossibly heavy in my fingers. The golden years paperwork blurred through my tears, becoming meaningless shapes on white paper. From the kitchen, I heard the sound of the back door opening, footsteps on the linoleum, Marcus stumbling back from the bathroom, his face pale as death. And then a voice I thought I'd never hear again. Hello, Jennifer. Trent walked into my living room, very much alive, flanked by 2 FBI agents with weapons drawn. You're dead, Jennifer whispered, her perfect composure finally cracking completely. That's what we wanted you to think. Agent Rodriguez stepped forward, her badge gleaming in the lamplight. Jennifer Romano, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and racketeering. As they cuffed Jennifer, she screamed at Trent with a fury that seemed to come from the depths of hell itself. You can't prove anything. That recording won't hold up in court. What recording? Trent smiled, and I saw the satisfaction of a man who'd outmaneuvered a predator. We didn't need a recording, Jennifer. We had something much better. He gestured toward Marcus, who was standing against the wall looking like he might collapse. We had your confession to a room full of federal agents. Every word you said tonight was transmitted to surveillance teams positioned around the house. Jennifer's face went white as she realized the magnitude of her mistake. The photograph of me dead in the cabin? That was staged this morning with the help of the FBI's crime scene unit. Very convincing, don't you think? As Agent Rodriguez led Jennifer toward the door, she turned back one last time. This isn't over. My uncle will never stop looking for that money. Your uncle was arrested 2 hours ago, Agent Rodriguez replied, along with 12 members of his organization. It's very much over. The door closed behind them, leaving me alone with my husband and the son who'd nearly gotten us all killed. For a long moment, none of us spoke. We just stood there in the wreckage of what had once been our family. I'm sorry, Marcus said finally, his voice broken. I'm so sorry for all of it. Trent moved to my chair and knelt beside it, taking my hands in his. Are you okay? I looked at this man who'd died twice to save me, who'd planned an elaborate deception to protect our family, who'd risked everything to give us a chance at justice. I will be, I said. And for the first time in weeks, I actually believed it might be true. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of our new house in Tucson, Arizona, watching the sunrise paint the desert mountains in shades of gold and pink. The house was smaller than our old one, but it was ours in a way the Sacramento house had never been. No ghosts here, no memories of betrayal, no shadows of the family who'd tried to destroy us. Trent emerged from the bedroom, moving slowly but steadily. The stress of the past year had aged him, but there was something lighter about him now. The weight of secrets and conspiracies had been lifted from his shoulders. "Coffee's ready," I told him, handing him his favorite mug. We'd developed new routines in this new life. Morning coffee on the back patio, watching the desert come alive with the rising sun. Evening walks through the neighborhood, where no one knew our story, and we were just another retired couple enjoying their golden years. "Any word from Agent Rodriguez?" Trent asked, settling into his patio chair. I pulled out the letter that had arrived yesterday, the FBI seal still crisp on the envelope. Jennifer got 25 years. Vincent Torino got life without parole. The rest of the organization received sentences ranging from 10 to 30 years. We sat in comfortable silence, processing the justice that had finally been served. 25 years felt like both too much and too little for what Jennifer had put us through, but it was enough to ensure she'd never hurt another family the way she'd hurt ours. "What about Marcus?" Trent asked quietly. That was the complicated question. Our son had testified against Jennifer's organization, providing crucial evidence about their methods and victims. His cooperation had earned him immunity from prosecution, but it couldn't repair the damage done to our relationship. "He called last week," I said. "He's been attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings. Got a job at a hardware store in Denver." A hardware store. After 20 years in corporate finance, Marcus was now selling screws and paint to weekend warriors. It was honest work, the kind that wouldn't tempt him back into the world of easy money and impossible dreams. "Does he want to see us?" I'd been asking myself that question since Marcus's last phone call. His voice had sounded different, humbler, maybe even wiser. The arrogance that had made him such an easy target for Jennifer's manipulation was gone, replaced by the uncertainty of a man rebuilding his life from scratch. He asked if we could meet for Christmas, said he wants to apologize properly. Trent nodded slowly. "What do you think?" I sipped my coffee, watching a roadrunner dart across our backyard in pursuit of some invisible prey. In the old life, I would have said yes immediately. Family was family, blood was blood, and you forgave because that's what mothers do. But that Dora Henderson had died in Sacramento, buried alongside the illusions of unconditional love and family loyalty. This Dora Henderson had learned that forgiveness was earned, not given, and that trust once broken required proof of change, not just promises. "I think he's still our son," I said finally, "but I also think we need to see who he's become before we decide what that means." 3 days later, we drove to the small cafe in Phoenix where Marcus had suggested we meet. I'd chosen a public place deliberately, neutral ground where emotions couldn't spiral out of control. Marcus was already waiting when we arrived, sitting at a corner table with his hands wrapped around a coffee cup, like it might anchor him to reality. He looked older, thinner, wearing clothes from discount stores instead of the designer suits Jennifer had insisted upon. But his eyes were clearer than I'd seen them in years. "Mom, Dad." He stood when we approached, his movements uncertain. "Thank you for coming." We sat across from him, the small table feeling like a vast chasm between our old life and whatever came next. "You look good," I said, and meant it. The stress lines around his eyes had softened, and there was something peaceful about him that hadn't been there during the Jennifer years. "I feel better than I have in a long time." Marcus's voice was steady, without the underlying desperation that had marked his speech during those final awful weeks in Sacramento. "I wanted to tell you both some things I should have said months ago." Trent leaned back in his chair, his expression carefully neutral. "We're listening." Marcus took a deep breath, like a man preparing to dive into deep water. "I know what I did was unforgivable. Not just the gambling, but bringing those people into your lives, putting you in danger. I know saying I'm sorry doesn't change anything. No, I said quietly. It doesn't. But I want you to know that I understand now what Jennifer was doing. How she manipulated me. How she encouraged every bad decision I made. The therapist I'm seeing, she helped me see the pattern. The therapist. At least he was getting professional help instead of just hoping the problem would resolve itself. Jennifer convinced me that my gambling was just bad luck, Marcus continued. That I was actually good at it, and if I could just get one big win, everything would be fine. She fed that delusion for 2 years. Why? Trent asked. What did she get out of encouraging you to lose money? The bigger my debt got, the more pressure there was to find creative solutions, like life insurance policies on family members, like selling the house while Mom was safely tucked away in assisted living. Marcus's hands shook slightly as he spoke. I could see the effort it took him to voice these truths, to admit how completely he'd been manipulated. She made me believe that you'd be happier somewhere safe, somewhere you'd be taken care of. I was so deep in debt, so scared of what would happen if I couldn't pay, that I convinced myself we were helping you. I studied my son's face, looking for signs of the old Marcus, the one who'd justified his choices with elaborate rationalizations, who'd blamed everyone but himself for his problems. This Marcus looked different, broken down and built back up, maybe stronger in the places where he'd been shattered. What's your plan now? I asked. Keep working. Keep going to meetings. Keep seeing the therapist. Marcus met my eyes directly for the first time since we'd sat down. And try to become the kind of man you and Dad could be proud of again. Again. The word hung in the air between us, weighted with the assumption that we'd been proud of him before. Before Jennifer. Before the gambling. Before he'd nearly gotten us killed. Had we been proud? I searched my memory for moments of genuine pride in Marcus's accomplishments, and found them surprisingly sparse. Good grades, because that's what was expected. A successful career because that's what Jennifer had demanded. But when had he last done something simply because it was right? Pride has to be earned, Trent said gently, just like trust. I know. Marcus nodded. I'm not asking for either one today. I'm just asking for the chance to earn them back. We talked for another hour, about his job and his therapy and his new apartment near the hardware store. Small talk mostly, the careful conversation of people learning to know each other again. But underneath it was something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. When we finally stood to leave, Marcus hesitated. Would it be okay if I called you? Not often, just maybe once a month, to let you know how I'm doing. I looked at Trent, seeing my own uncertainty reflected in his eyes. We'd built a good life in Tucson, a peaceful life free from the chaos Marcus had brought to our family. Did we want to risk that peace by letting him back in? Once a month, I said finally. We'll see how it goes. Marcus smiled, and for a moment I saw the little boy he'd been before gambling and greed and Jennifer Romano had twisted him into someone I barely recognized. Thank you, he whispered, for giving me a chance. The drive back to Tucson was quiet, both of us lost in our own thoughts. As we pulled into our driveway, Trent finally spoke. Do you think he's really changed? I considered the question while I unlocked the front door, while I hung up my purse and started dinner preparations. Marcus had looked different, sounded different. But people could change their appearance and their words more easily than they could change their hearts. I think he wants to change, I said finally. Whether he can actually do it remains to be seen. That evening, we sat on our back patio watching another spectacular Arizona sunset. The desert was painted in impossible shades of red and orange, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. Any regrets? Trent asked, taking my hand in his. I thought about the question seriously. Did I regret the confrontation with Jennifer? The months of fear and uncertainty? The decision to leave Sacramento and start over? No, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. I regret that it took us so long to see what was happening. I regret that we didn't protect ourselves sooner, but I don't regret fighting back. Trent squeezed my hand. Me neither. We'd lost things in that fight. The illusion of family unity, the comfort of familiar surroundings, the naive belief that blood relationships guaranteed love and loyalty. But we'd gained things too. The knowledge that we could survive betrayal, the proof that we could reinvent ourselves in our 70s, the peace that comes from living without secrets or shame. "I love you," I told my husband, this man who died twice to save me. "I love you too," he replied. "Here's to whatever comes next." As the stars appeared in the desert sky, I thought about Jennifer Romano sitting in a federal prison cell, about Vincent Torino spending the rest of his life behind bars, about Marcus learning to live with the consequences of his choices. Justice had been served, but more importantly, we had survived. We were free. And in the end, freedom was worth more than any inheritance, any house, any family obligation. We were finally, truly free. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.